On behalf of New York DSA, I'd like to award you with this plaque, which reads, "In honor of Paul Anthony DuBrul, penetrating analyst of the permanent government, for his participation in the sit-in movement, for his organizing of workers north and south, for his historic role as leader in the fight against lead poisoning in ghetto children, for his active opposition to the Vietnam War, for his work and education of others on behalf of democratic socialism, for his opposition to totalitarianism everywhere, for his magnificent behind-the-scenes assistant to progressive politicians, and for his tender dedication to his son Sasha and to the well-being of all of our children, New York Democratic Socialists of America honors Paul for his commitment to our movement and to our organization on this date, June 13th, 1985. Stanley Aronowitz, Chair, Joanne Mort, Vice Chair.
This may be briefer than I had intended. As many of you must be aware, I'm working on oxygen, which is in the container behind me on the floor. And I've only been out of the hospital a couple of days, so I'm not my usual vigorous self. I just want to correct several errors that were made here this evening. First of all, it's not that I'm brusque. It's that I just don't have the breath to waste. I have never been so happy as I am this evening. I think that this is more than I could ever have dreamt. Spending all of those years working behind the scenes and sometimes feeling, I must admit, very lonely. The love I felt here tonight is absolutely spectacular. And I want to thank each and every one of you for giving me something very special, and for giving to my family something very special. I just have to share one thing with you. My horoscope in the Daily News this morning said, "A wonderful experience restores your self-confidence and faith in life." It then goes on to say, "Tend to your own affairs at this time." And as we all know, I can't do that. I'd like to call to mind some comrades who can't be with us this evening. Call them back to memory, actually. Bob Arnold, Judy Ades, Paul Davidoff, and my parents, Mary and Tony DuBrul. I know they would want to be here, and I feel very strongly that as long as we remember them, they will always live. I want to tell a story about myself that happened very recently that shows how gratifying certain things can become. I haven't been going out of the house much, but people have been coming to see me. And one of the groups that came to see me to discuss the permanent government was Marty Gottlieb's journalism class at the Columbia J School. And they were coming to see me the week they were going to speak with Bobby Wagner Jr., who was going to give them the official line on the fiscal crisis. And we spent a very good, raucous evening in our living room. And Wagner showed up the next week and was told who else the class had spoken to in reference to the fiscal crisis, and then went before this group of students. Marty told me afterwards, Wagner came out shaking his head and saying, Jesus, you've got a bunch of little DuBruls running around in there. I would like to speak about some of the people in my life I call benchmarks. I'm terribly sorry that Michael isn't here tonight, although I know he has to be in Sweden, because I've never really said to him the thank you that I want to say. Actually, Jack is wrong only one detail, but he says, I met Mike in the summer of '58. I was playing touch football at a student conference, and then it got too dark, and I went up on a porch, and there was Mike holding forth. And he made so much sense to me that we talked for a while, and he said, well, stay in touch when you get back to New York. And I did, and then Jack and I went to hear him, and that's when we joined the movement. Michael has always represented to me the clarity of intellect, basic decency, and the single standard of democracy that I feel are the essence of socialism. I find it awkward and painful to have to append democratic before I say socialism these days, but we all know that that has become necessary. And I just don't want to add any other words to it. So let's keep it stopped there. Because I think that what we need now, more than ever, is one socialist movement. I'll say more about that in a few minutes. Solly Silverman is another of my benchmarks. Solly was a spectacular, almost elemental force in my life when I first became a trade unionist. He taught me all the things that a youngster starting out in the movement needed to know. How to keep ball bearings in your pocket so you could throw them on the street so that the horse cops would ride down on you and fall on their ass. How to carry an iron bar wrapped up in the New York Times to kill scabs with. All of the fine points of etiquette that he had learned earlier in the CIO. Solly taught me, and I see it again represented in a story that Irving Howell used, that the story is that there's this guy who sits beside the road in this small Jewish town, and he's there, rain, snow, summer. He just sits and sits and sits. So finally, the traveler's going by and sees him. He says, what do you do here? He says, well, the town pays me to sit here and wait for the Messiah. And he says, I'll tell you something. I'm terribly underpaid. But I'll tell you something else. It's steady work. Solly taught me that being a radical in this country is steady work. And he showed me, with the example of his own life, how to do that work well, with a great deal of decency, with a good sense of humor, which is absolutely quintessentially necessary to anything we do, and the kind of personal warmth and commitment to friends that I think make an important difference to anything we do. Jack Newfield is another of my benchmarks. I don't know really what I can say about our friendship. It's the longest and warmest in my life. We are truly brothers in many ways. I've never really said this very many other places, but it was Jack, through his constant nudging that got me writing again and gave me back. I say writing again, I mean writing again in my own name and writing much larger works than press releases and reports for politicians and speeches or the vast amounts of writing I've done, ghostwriting I've done. He freed me to write again in my name and for my views, openly and cleanly. And I can never repay that debt. Ruth is all of our measure of what is right and good in politics. She, I think, is what, throughout the future of this city, young people will look to and aspire to emulate when it comes to the qualities of effectiveness and decency and honesty that we are going to need if we're ever to save not only the city, but this country and this world. And I think if I had any power, it would be to replicate her. I don't know if cloning works, but to have another Ruth Messenger, first in each of the counties, and then to duplicate her some more, and to spread that seed throughout this nation, because she is the politics of hope, and hopefully the politics of tomorrow. My son Sasha, I love my son very much, as you all know now. He's a spectacular human being and my best friend. He also helped me in a way he won't understand now, but I hope will understand someday. You know, we used to talk about hostages to fortune. How when a man or a woman gets responsibilities, gets a family, gets kids, they become more conservative. They walk away from the beliefs they had as youths, that they, give in to indignities. When Sasha was born, the thing that struck me is I used to hold him in my arms and we would have long conversations as I fed him a bottle at 2 o'clock in the morning. The thing that struck me was how much harder I had to work and how much better I had to do to try to reshape the world so that some lunatic wouldn't come along and blow it up or harm him or force him to kill some other father's son in some field someplace. Far from being a hostage to fortune, Sasha has been the one most liberating influence in my adult life. And for that, I can never repay him. I've been going at this, perhaps you haven't noticed, but chronologically. Today's a very special day because of what's happening here tonight, but also because tomorrow is Liza and my first anniversary. I told her, and continue to tell her, that she was crazy to marry me. She admits that. But stoically hangs on nevertheless. I find a great deal of strength from her, and I am constantly astounded at the amount of energy she still has and the amount of overwhelming commitment to do her job well, to represent workers well, to make our family a wonderful, loving, happy, fulfilled family, and to make herself an attractive, exciting woman. I'm a very, very lucky guy. And that luck has sustained me through some very, very bad days. And I know it will continue to sustain me in the years that come. I have married the rebel girl, and I'm damn lucky. Now, an event like this would not be worth anything without some political comments. And they will be brief, because I do have a very limited ability to use oxygen these days. I think that the movement is about to experience a new incarnation. That the kinds of exciting things we're seeing on campuses, in trade union struggles, in neighborhoods, around housing and tenant issues, I think these are the beginnings of what we started in the 60s on a much firmer, more solid foundation. And I think that in order to help with that birth, that one of the things this country needs, perhaps the essential thing this country needs, is a strong, unified socialist left. And I think I wouldn't be here that DSA has the potential to become that organization. Now, I've grown up for a long time on the left, and I've witnessed all of our tribal problems. But I come from a strange background. And I think probably amazingly for most people who were left in the country, certainly in my generation, the strangeness was that I had no background. My parents were workers. They hadn't been in any party, in any sectlet, in any other kind of organization except the CIO. Coming from that background, I was able to learn and to take from people who called themselves Trotskyists, communists, social democrats, Christian socialists, labor Zionists. They all had something to teach me as a young man growing up in the movement. I must honestly admit I've never learned anything from a Maoist, but you can't all be completely successful. I think that at this juncture, a lot of us hold on to those connections of the past out of a sense of nostalgia and fear of losing something, remembered insults, God only knows what. Perhaps it's the fear that we all fear to embark on something new. I think the time for that kind of nostalgic tribalism is past. And so tonight I want to urge all of you, many of whom are dues cheaters, to give DSA a chance to look at it seriously. And if you can find it in your heart to come in and build the new movement that's aborting, then join us, work with us, and be part of us. Because we desperately need you. But my suspicion is that you in America desperately need us. Thank you very much.